Hello and welcome to a brand new webinar. This is the So You Want to Be a Motorsport Presenter webinar. Thanks to the guys at New Channel Media who are helping us by sponsoring all our webinars now. And it's great to be here. And it's great to have such an amazing panel lined up for you to try and inspire you, to motivate you and give you a bit of an insight into what it's like to actually be a TV presenter. Because it's something a lot of people aspire to be. So as if by magic, let me welcome our panel.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. And the first thing we'll do is have a whip around and introduce everybody to you. So let's start with Steve Ryder, because he's to my left on my screen. It's not age before beauty. I know. Look, you're our diversity quota for today. You and me, that's it.
Oh, I'm diverse, yes.
Steve Ryder, please do tell us a little about what you do and how you got to do what you do.
Completely by accident when I reflect on it, but basically I've been involved in television for the best part of 40 odd years. Not necessarily specializing in motorsport, but specializing in motorsport in the latter years. So I've worked for a program that your young viewers would never have heard of called BBC Grandstand. And via that, I was able to involve myself in lots of major sporting occasions and really sort of developed a particular affinity for Formula One. Went on to do Formula One for ITV. And basically, I find myself in this position because I was rude to far too many people at the BBC and ITV, and this is where I am now. But hopefully I can offer some constructive advice for those who want to follow this path.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. Let's go to Simon Lazenby next.
Hi, hello everybody. I'm Simon. I suppose I started with Sky. I've been a bit of a Sky lifer. So I went to university, did biology, cut up a load of dogfish, which was great preparation to start.
I thought you were going to say dogs, Simon.
Dogfish,
I'm so glad.
Not dogs, not fish, dogfish. Yeah, dogfish type of fish. So went from that into grain trading. I wasn't particularly good at grain trading. In fact, sort of was losing my kitchen sink most weeks. So thought, right, my sister was in TV. She was a runner on The Big Breakfast. I thought, oh, that sounds like a bit of fun. So I got a bit of work experience at Sky, started off making the teas and coffees. It was quite a young company then. And so they gave us an opportunity. Yeah, I was in an edit suite one day, working behind the scenes. And then somebody said, right, go and get your tie, you're on this evening. And we started on Sky Sports News, then moved into rugby, did golf and cricket and bowls and ice hockey. And then lucky enough to get the F1 gig when it came up.
Amazing. Who knew? Started with dogfish.
Yeah, we started with dogfish.
Matt Roberts, tell us about you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me, Jenny. Yeah, I kind of had a sort of unusual route into it as well. I'd never really had it as a grand plan or anything. I actually studied Spanish at university, and then I went out to Barcelona after I graduated, and I got a job working for a company called Dorna, who, for F1 fans, it would be the equivalent of like FOM. So the Bernie Eccleston of MotoGP World Motorbikes is a Spanish gentleman. So I ended up working there. They were the rights holders to the championship. I was kind of like the in-house English person doing press releases and the website and things like that. And then very quickly went into commentating on the world feeds for the MotoGP races. And it coincided at a really good time because Valentino Rossi was just starting to become this global superstar, and the BBC took an interest in it. And yeah, I ended up for a couple of years, I did both jobs. I was working for Dorna, and they kind of used to loan me to the BBC to be a pit lane reporter. So I'd change into the BBC shirt, and then for like half an hour before we went on air, and then back into my Dorna shirt straight afterwards, and continued that for a few years, and then eventually went directly with the BBC, and got to do that up until 2013, and then BBC lost the rights to the MotoGP, and I left and went to Eurosport to do Superbikes, which has been fantastic. I've got to do Winter Olympics a couple of years ago with them, and various different sports. I did a few different things with the BBC as well. I did did the NFL actually. Never quite got to work with Vernon, unfortunately, on the NFL or on motorsport, but maybe one day. So yeah, it's that's where I am now. And like I said, it was never really something that, as much as I very much looked up to Steve and Des Lineman and guys like that when I was growing up watching Grandstand, I never actually thought that I would kind of get into the industry myself.
Cool stuff. Thanks, Matt.
The grey makes me look older than I am, I promise.
He's a young whippersnapper, really.
Yeah.
With very coiffed, out of all of us, actually, I'd say Matt has the best hair. I don't know how he's managed it, seeing as we're so far into lockdown. Mine started out blonde. Vernon, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, my career path is a bit of a mad one, really, because I left college after doing environmental science, which is a bit random, and I basically graduated in socializing. So I was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I didn't know where to go, I didn't know what to do, and I was kind of living for the weekend. And then bizarrely, I ended up on a reality show for ITV, and my career path early on did the stereotypical reality TV show, guest appearances on various daytime shows, that kind of thing, magazine shows. And then I thought, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I could always be a lorry driver because my dad had a successful haulage company, and he always said, "Oh, you could always come and drive for me." So it was always there, But once I got to experience what it was like to be in a TV studio, I thought, oh, I wonder if I could give this a crack and give it a go. And I was fortunate enough to meet a few people that gave me a chance of just doing little bits of what they call vox pops, where you go on the street and you ask people questions. We were asking people questions. I was working on a music show, and we're asking people questions about the current chart releases. So we would walk around Covent Garden in central London with the CD singles of that week's chart releases, and we'd vox pop, which it means voice of the people. And we would say, "Hi, this is the current single from U2. It's called Beautiful Day. Will you let us know what you think of it?" And we'd play it on a beatbox. And they'd say, "Yeah, okay." So anyway, things escalated, and then I managed to get onto an ITV shiny floor. And still, I've always had a passion for sports, and I ended up doing some golf, some American football. I did England's official sponsor, O2's content with the England rugby team, doing that again next week. And then I got asked by North One or Aurora Media, the company that do the Formula E. They said, "Look, we've got the contract for Channel 5. Will you come? We need a host. Will you come and do it?" And I was aware of Formula E. And then it kind of became a case of, right, knuckle down, learn everything. And I spoke to Steve Jones, who does Channel 4's Formula 1 coverage. And I spoke to Jake Humphrey, and Steve said, please excuse the Welsh accent, but he said, all you need to know is enough stuff to start a conversation. You don't need to go through their bins. So I thought that's great advice. And then I've loved every single minute I've been in the grid. It's one of the most exhilarating and one of the most rewarding TV experiences of my career, being involved in Formula E. And I mean that. And that's after 14 seasons of saying, "Oh, so this is," on Family Fortune.
Which has got to be a pretty cool job. You kind of answered Jack Pickering's question. If you want to get your questions in, please do on the Q&A tab. Who said basically, how much persuading did it take for you to come into motorsport, and did you speak to Steve Jones? And you kind of answered that already. So
yeah, we were former colleagues at T4. So I replaced Ben Shepherd and Dermot O'Leary. Steve Jones replaced me, and then Nick Grimshaw replaced Steve Jones. So I thought I'd give him a ring and find out what it's all about. And yeah, there's a massive difference, huge difference between entertainment presenting and sports presenting, because the majority of entertainment presenting is pre-recorded. Sport is 99% always live. And when you come across a situation that isn't as planned, that's when all your TV experience comes into fruition. And that's when you really need to kind of take the bull by the horns and say, right, how do I basically get us off air safely, happily, so that no one gets fired? It's
good when no one gets fired. Okay, so what have been some of your best experiences of presenting and some of your worst? Simon, let's start with you. A best and worst. The others can all have a time to think about this. You get none. It's tough because we've all been in the game for quite a while. No disrespect.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think probably we'll all draw on, you know, the biggest things we've done on air. I think are quite often the most rewarding, but oftentimes it's not. But you know, we've been lucky enough to have Lewis winning throughout the time that Sky's had the Formula One. I think it does help having you know, the most successful British driver of all time, and you know, joint with Michael now, the most successful driver of British time of all time. That really does. You know, you look back on that and you think, yeah, you know, as an era, very lucky to be fronting some coverage of the sport during that. But then I did Lions tours as well in my time on rugby, which I thoroughly enjoyed, being a big rugby fan too. So yeah, I think they're immeasurable, really. I mean, I've been doing it 22 years now, and I think where's the time gone? There's been some really difficult moments. Obviously, Jules Bianchi. Any time you get something like that, it's part and parcel, as the guys know, in motorsport. That's really difficult in terms of presentation, because you know, you've got to be cognizant of you know, what's going on, how the team's feeling, the family watching, all that kind of stuff. That's when it's really tough. But you know, at the same time, I suppose that's where kind of a bit of experience comes into things. I'm sure Stephen and Vernon and Matt will, you know, think the same on that kind of thing. That's one of the hardest parts about motorsport.
Yeah, because I presented MotoGP for the year with Matt alongside me, which was great to work together. But that wasn't a great year. We had one death then of a young lad called Shoya Tamazawa. And then the year later, of course, Marco Simoncelli died. And Matt, you were presenting and reporting that year, and that was tough, wasn't it? And those are the times that you have to draw on everything, as Simon said, that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, exactly that. It's something in motorsport, as Simon said, that you hope never to have to deal with, but there's always a chance. And you know, at the back of your mind, you know, I'm sure Stephen Vernon will have been in this situation too, where you have to be prepared for it. Although, having said that, there's nothing that really can prepare you for it. With the Simoncelli one, it happened during the race. It was just a couple of laps into the race, so we were live on air. And at the time when it actually happened and they red flagged the race, we were all very aware that it was very serious. But you know, there was no official news for quite some time, so we had to stay on air until they decided what to do and whether they were going to restart the race or not. And we were just filling at that point. Kind of everybody at the circuit around pit lane really knows that something really bad has happened, yet you somehow have to fill that airtime by speaking to people. It's such an awkward and difficult situation, and that's when probably the most important thing I would say at that juncture is relationships with people in the paddock that you know that you can talk to, that they know that you're not going to ask them something inappropriate or a difficult question, and that there's some trust there, that you can get something that is appropriate for the moment, which is extremely difficult to do. So yeah, that would be certainly the most difficult situation you could be in motorsport, I think. What's
been your most enjoyable moment, Matt?
Well, I think probably the thing with motorsport is you get extreme lows like that and extreme highs too. You know, the adrenaline. Vernon touched on it about being on the grid at a Formula E race. And I think like those few moments before a race starts, when you're out on the grid and you're seeing these kind of like warriors ready to go to battle, they're almost like Spitfire pilots ready to fly off, you know. And there's that. I think it's very difficult to match that in any other sporting environment. You know, just the anticipation, and so being present in that context is a real privilege, and it's really, really exciting. And also for me, I remember there was a great race between Valentino Rossi and Casey Stoner at Laguna Seca in 2008, where, you know, it was an all-time, it was a big show. Tom Cruise was there. It was like this, you know, beautiful Californian sunshine and this epic battle between two greats of the sport. And at the end of it, the they fell out in Parc Ferme, and I was the first person kind of on the scene, and I got to stick the microphone in there and get the responses. And I had that. Valentino had a race with Jorge Lorenzo in Barcelona in 2009 as well, which is another kind of classic. And to be the person that gets to speak to them while their adrenaline is still flowing, and you're getting all these incredible reactions of these truly kind of elite sportsmen right in that heat of the moment, is they're the moments that I really remember, fondly from doing it.
Vernon, let's come to you next. Best and worst.
Sorry. Best moment for me has I've got a few really, but I think because we should never forget that we're so fortunate that we do what we do, because a lot of people want to get into broadcast media, and it is difficult to get into. It's a tough gig, but everyone on the panel, my dad used to say, no one's going to give you anything. They're not going to give you anything. Everyone on the panel's worked really hard. And for people watching who want to get into TV presenting, it's not easy. It doesn't matter whether you've got, the personality of one of the world's greatest comedians and that quick wit and the humor. You've got to work hard because sport is brutal. I think my second race in Marrakesh, I had this hideous fever. Dario Franchitti and I had this hideous fever that lasted about 4 weeks. We were both in the fetal position in bed after the Marrakesh race. And it felt like I was in some kind of weird 60s movie where everything started moving. It got quite psychedelic. And I don't know what it was. I don't know whether it was food poisoning or whether it was a fever, but it was a weird sensation.
It's what you get in Marrakesh.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. And I'll never forget. And it haunts me to this day. I get a cold sweat when I think about it. But I went to interview Sebastian Buemi in his car, and he sat down. So when a driver's seated, guys, it's pretty much a no-go to stick a microphone under his helmet and ask him a question. So I've already crossed the line. I don't know where I am. I don't know what my own name is, never mind his name. And I'm just sat there, and it's so funny. It haunts me now. I'm getting all nervous thinking about it. I sat for 45 seconds, which is a lifetime in live television, just staring at his steering wheel. And our director said, Vernon, if you can hear me, just say something. Because they all knew how poorly I was and how sick I was. And it's those moments that haunt you. But when you kind of click the finger, you're away and you're up and running. So that's probably one of my worst sports moments of all time. I can't explain how scary it makes me feel even now. Just standing there, knowing I was live on air, not being able to say or see anything. But the ups are the highlights are pretty much what we all experience. Those great victorious moments, the great challenges, the great duels on the track, the ones that get everyone excited. You can hear it as the commentators' voices elevate like 25 octaves higher, especially with Jack Nicholls on Formula E. But it's those winning moments, and when you realize that even though it's an individual in the cockpit or on the seat, it's a massive team effort, motorsport, like massive. We watch football and we watch rugby, and there's 15 and 11 guys on the field, but motorsport, it's one person with the responsibility of the whole team on their shoulders. And that's what's amazing. Those euphoric moments when the driver gets back to the paddock and the pit.
Steve.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the most memorable moment for me, and I've been ever so lucky, to be adjacent to Olympic Games and Masters golf and everything else over the course of the last 40 years. But for me, the most satisfying moment is when you realize that crucial sort of crossroads in your career has come, and you've been given an opportunity. And if you cock it up, that opportunity isn't going to come again. And I just sort of got into television, in regional television in East Anglia with Anglia Television. in the late 70s. And ITV were planning their coverage of the 1980 Olympics in Moscow. And it was the time when ITV had about 16 companies. And so they'd all argue about who should be the chief engineer and who should be the director and the producer and all that sort of thing. And the arguments went on for days and days. And we had a lovely old boss there called John Bromley, who could cut through any sort of nonsense like this. And the last thing on the agenda was who was going to present. And he said, I don't want any debate around the network at all. He said, let's pick someone that no one's heard of. And so they rang Anglia and they said, who have you got to present, could present the Olympics? And said, well, we've only got one guy, Steve Ryder, who's been here 18 months and so on. Tell him he's presenting the Olympics. And that was it. And it was at the time of the political boycott. So you had Dickie Davis back in London. And I was the only guy running the ITV studio in Moscow, the only link man, and the majority of the coverage was coming from that source. So I went there, and I was 30 years old, and I knew that if I cocked this up, then the phone wasn't going to ring again. And fortunately, I managed to survive the 2 weeks, learned an awful lot along the way. I was in a studio in the Ostankino television tower in Moscow, and it was completely manned by Russian crew. And there's me. I didn't know my way around the television studio. I'd never done network television. We formed a sort of basic communication with this crew, and we established after about 4 days that of everyone in that studio, I lived closest to Moscow. And I lived just outside Stowmarket. And everyone, the whole crew had been flown in from Siberia, and none of us knew what the hell we were doing. And we ended up presenting the Olympics, and, you know, day 10, in comes Sebastian Coe with his 1500 meter gold medal. Wonderful. And I got on the plane coming back from Moscow, and I thought, well, that was absolutely sink or swim. And from now on, as long as you don't completely cock it up, you should have a half decent career. So that was probably the best moment.
I love it. So many good tales. I think that's the thing. You're all storytellers. You all know how to talk to people and communicate and bring out the very best.
Yeah, but we're all sort of telling the same story, and I think the story is that if you're looking for some guidance, is that what has happened to us along the way has all been coincidence. It's all been luck. It's all been the odd opportunity that comes along, and you have to grasp that. And I think if you say, right, how can I plan to be a motorsport presenter? Where you can't plan to do that. You can plan to have the kind of career that will guide you in that direction. And when the opportunity comes, you're qualified and you're equipped to take it. And I think that's the main sort of guidance that we could provide. But, you know, the fun you have along the way is second to none.
I think it's a career where you never stop learning. I mean, I've recently, funnily enough, Steve and I live relatively close to each other. We live quite near each other, and I saw Steve on the high street recently, and I was desperate to. I said to him, I said, look, I'd love to meet you. I'd love to sit down, and I'd love to pick your brains on how you make a sports broadcast as entertaining as Steve has throughout his career. You know, it's my fourth season this season in Formula E, and if you're going to learn, get the opportunity to learn from the best. So, you know, once we come out of lockdown, I'll be sipping from the decanters behind Steve whilst he retorts and tells us his great motorsport stories.
Marlo, I didn't recognize Vernon.
I'd just come out of the I'm a Celebrity jungle or castle. I was like 3.5 stone lighter.
I hadn't seen a frame of it either. I must apologize because I asked you what you've been doing and you've been in the jungle. I hadn't seen a frame of it.
Yeah, it's funny. Very, very funny. But it is one of those careers where you're always learning. You know, you're always learning about new drivers. You're always learning about new members of your own production team, and you're always learning about new members of whatever motorsport you're hosting, their team. So you never get, or you never should really put the manual down. You should always have your fingers flicking through the pages and constantly learning. And that's one thing that everyone I spoke to within motorsport told me to do. Is, you know, like Steve Jones said, learn enough, but you don't need to go through the bin. So I stuck Post-it notes with questions on various parts of the house. So all the girls, when they put on their school uniform, there'd be a Post-it note inside their sweater, and it would say, who are the drivers for Nissan Edams, you know, and Nissan. And it was all kinds of stuff like that, you know, and I'm like, oh, it's this guy and this guy. Like, yeah, well done, Dad. Off we go to school. You know, just kind of questions around the house.
You poor kids.
Renault Edams. Still don't know.
Thing is, I suppose, because we travel with them now, because it's you get to know, it becomes your second family. You spend as much time with the people on the road as you do at home. And frankly, with the way homeschooling is going, I can't wait to get back out. But I think that kind of immersion, if you're lucky enough, as Steve was saying, to get the opportunity to get in, you then spend a lot of your time with everybody. You get to know them, they become your friends in the paddock, whether that's the team bosses, the mechanics, the engineers. You travel with them, you talk to them, and you get to know them. And I think being fully immersed in the sport gives you that kind of depth of knowledge to fall back on, where when you've got long periods to fill. I go back to Austin a few years ago. It was a total washout, and they were making boats in the pit lane and sending them down there. And we had I think it was a 4-hour fill, and we didn't put anything, we didn't put any old races or anything. We kind of see it as a challenge to stay live for that long. And because Sky's got their own channel, you can do that. And I think, going back to what Matt was saying, because you've got the relationships and people trust you, you can walk in and out of motorhomes, and it's quite freewheeling, isn't it? And with that depth of knowledge, you can sort of fall back on it.
Yeah, I think establishing the relationship with your on-air team as well is really important. First of all, one of the tips I was given when I first started at the BBC was when you're on screen, you're in somebody's living room, and you have to seem comfortable to be there, because if someone's in your living room and they're uncomfortable, then you feel uncomfortable as well. So generating a natural relationship with the people that you work with on screen as well as off screen, I think that's massively important. And also off screen, because I'm sure you guys have all done it, where you kind of say something that you think's funny, but you're not sure, and you go, oh yeah, this would be quite a good gag. And if no one in the truck laughs, if no one in your ear laughs, you suddenly think, oh no, that was a bad joke. You just need the laugh down your ear. Sometimes you need that kind of relationship, off air as well, where, there can be long days too and challenging situations. So all of that can keep your spirit up and keep you feeling positive and comfortable. And as I said, establishing a relationship with those people away, whether it's at dinner or in the pub in the evening after a long day or whatever, I think that all comes across on the screen as well. And as you guys said, it's the moments where you're not prepared for, moments where you've either got to try and get off air or stay on, where all of that really comes in. Because to an extent, anyone can learn a line to say hello and welcome to wherever we are, and it's round one and all those things. But it's the kind of the more off the cuff things that you can't really prepare for.
Yeah, to my mind, the greatest step forward to, if you like, the ultimate ambition of becoming a TV presenter or a presenter of motorsport is to understand how the television mechanics works. Forget the detailed research into the sport that you're presenting. You've got to understand how the program works, and you can get that experience by not necessarily working on motorsport, but by putting yourself in a position where you can work on a whole range of ideally live television, ideally live outside broadcasts. And to my mind, if there is a simple lesson when you're standing there as a live television presenter, be it Formula One, be it golf or whatever, is to have in your mind what you're going to do next. What will you do if that VT, which is running for 4.5 minutes, stops in the next 10 seconds? What are you going to say? Where are you going to go? What have you got in your mind if that interviewee you're expecting doesn't turn up? What are you going to say? Where are you going to go? And you've got to be that sort of 2.5 minutes ahead of the truck, really, to really give that impression, a sort of false impression that you're thinking on your feet. In fact, you've had a plan B for every single stage of the outside broadcast, and it's that sort of experience that people tend to take for granted, and that sort of qualification that people tend to take for granted, but you learn that the hard way by putting yourself in an environment where you can practice, and it is getting miles under your belt that counts as much as anything. You know, the way you appear on screen and the way you contribute to a program. Experience is everything.
Steve, let me ask you a question. I apologize, gang, but have you ever been in a situation where it's slightly controversial, but have you ever been in a situation where you're interviewing someone where you think, if I poke the fire here, this whole thing is just going to go?
You've been in not really. There's been a couple of occasions where probably in a recorded interview, because it is recorded, you can push someone a little bit further. I mean, to be honest, I'm not in that sort of controversial kind of area of broadcasting. If you're talking to someone after they've just won the Masters, if you're talking to someone after they've just won the British Grand Prix, you know, you're not going to win any friends by being controversial or abrasive, or you know, you are just trying to provide a conduit for that person to, you know, show their emotions and everything else. I think the closest I came when I thought I've got to be very careful how I ask the next question is when Nick Faldo won the Open Championship at Muirfield.
Did you ask him about his wardrobe? What are you wearing, Nicholas?
And I mean, it was that one where he stood up at the RNA presentation and thanked the press from the heart of his bottom. You remember that one? When went, oh no. And but ahead of that, he had surrendered a 5-shot lead, and he hold one like that on the last green and salvaged the victory, and sort of half broke down on the green, you may recall. And he went to the scorer's hut. And the Dr. Mackenzie, the RNA doctor, came out of the scorer's hut and said, just be very careful how you handle this. And Nick came straight over and he sat down with me, and it was just like a stream of consciousness. He just wouldn't stop talking. The eyes were staring and so on and so forth. And fortunately, we only had 2 minutes for the interview anyway. And I thought, if I ask him another question or one of those emotional, you know, what does it mean to you kind of questions, you are going to completely collapse. And off he went. And the doctor came to me afterwards and he said, well done. He said, if he had been in a road accident, I'd have put him in hospital. He said he is physically in shock. And then he went out 5 minutes later and gave the daftest speech of his life on the 18th green. But, you know, it's moments like that that you think, you know, you've got to look after this person as much as score a few points as a journalist as well.
Yeah, good point.
Amazing. And we've got loads of questions coming in, so I'm going to try and whiz through these. So I'll direct them as best I can. If you've got something you want to reply, then just shout out. But let's go to Alex McLaughlin first, because he says, he or she could be either. How do you gain confidence in front of the camera, and how do you deal with nerves when you go live? Who wants to answer this one? Let's go with Simon. You rolled your eyes, so that would be good.
Oh, well, with regards to handling nerves, I suppose if you're not nervous, you kind of you're maybe not in the right frame of mind for it. But I think that it's again that experience. The more you do it, I mean, I get far more nervous if I'm speaking in front of a room full of people. For going back to what Matt says, because you know if you dropped a clanger or you know or the joke has fallen flat, because you'll get an immediate reaction. But the thing with TV is you probably don't know that, do you? Unless the gallery are being particularly loud in your ear. But yeah, I don't really get too nervous before I go on now. I think that's just.
Oh, he's got eyes flowing through his beard.
I don't know. It's just you do so much live TV now. It's you kind of go on and it's I suppose you just get used to it. I don't know. How do you feel about it, Ben? Do you still?
I get nervous, yeah, because I think I get nervous because of having done 20 years of entertainment broadcasting. There's still, you know, we live in a realm, and I know it shouldn't affect us and I know it shouldn't influence us, but we live in this world with this thing called social media. And I remember my first weekend at Formula E, I got the pronunciation of one of the driver's surnames slightly wrong. Still same ballpark, but slightly wrong. And I was like, Twitter just went off. I'm like, hang on a minute. It's just like, instead of A, I said you know, or something like that. But that's how precious sports fans are about the content that you're delivering. You know, it's all well and good. Your jazz hands can only get you so far. But with sports and facts and stats, if you're giving false information, you're just digging yourself a very deep, dark pit. So that's why I get nervous, because, you know, you study and study and study, but if you trip up over something, you're like, oh no. And you know you've said it straight away, like, oh. But that's what, you know, I think it was Steve, sorry, it might be you, Simon, where you say the team around you to support you is equally as important as the microphone in your hand, you know, and you just, yeah, I get nervous, but I think it's an adrenaline thing as well. You know, we're broadcasting live, so there's no room for error. It's an amazing experience. There's a great atmosphere at the side of the track, and you cannot but enjoy it. It's an amazing experience. It really is. And for everyone who wants to get into telly, I beg you, push and push and push yourself to try and get through the door, because it is one of the best jobs ever. And that's from a screen caretaker.
Yeah, you got to embrace the nerves as well, because that is part of it. And I am terrible 20 minutes before any live outside or anything, you know, a live speaking or anything. And then once it is like a footballer in a cup final getting his first touch of the ball. You know, once you've done that, once you're 30 seconds into the program, minute and a half into the program, and you've survived that, everything is fantastic. But you know, don't be deceived by the people you see on screen who appear ultra cool. I worked for many years with Desmond Lynam on Grandstand. We didn't work together that much, but we will come together once a year for Sports Personality of the Year. And this was the kind of show that we weren't used to. I mean, Vernon is bread and butter to you, but, you know, it's a live studio audience and it's very high profile and so on. 16, 17 million audience and live. And Sue Barker and I would present alongside Des Lynam, and Des was Joe Cool. And except that behind the scenes for the last 30 minutes before every one of those programs, he was absolutely inconsolable. This is going to be a disaster. This is going to go, you know, you take over here. And we had to we poured a fair amount of brandy down him before every program. And Sue and I would then be in absolute bits when you walk out on and everyone, oh, Des, oh, fantastic. And then Sue and I will be, you know, looking at each other thinking, bloody hell, you know.
Wow.
But it's, everyone gets nerves, and it's not something to be uncomfortable about or embarrassed about, and, you know, embrace it.
I think I remember, Matt, you know that I suffered quite badly with nerves in MotoGP in 2010. And I think it was the start of the Australian MotoGP. And I'm stood, we must have been about a minute from transmission. And, you know, you've got a countdown in your ear. There's a lot going on as a presenter, and you have to look serene and calm while it's all going on around you. And I said to my floor manager at the time, I said, oh, I feel really sick. Not sure I can do this. And I was just like Vernon said, I thought, if I open my mouth, I know what's going to happen. And with MotoGP, the guys are on two wheels. If there's a big splodge of something horrible in front of them, it's all, I mean, it's just the fear that was in me for that 1 minute of prior to transmission of thinking, am I actually going to be sick on a grid? And how bad is this going to be for me if I was? It was horrific. So I think nerves are something you have to embrace and then just get over and get on with. But they're part of it, Matt, aren't they? They're part of the experience of presenting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's being out of your comfort zone is when it's worse. I mean, I know when I first started doing the MotoGP, but the first race I ever presented, I think it was 2007 in China, and the producer Belinda rang me up at 7 o'clock in the morning in my room, and she said, Susie's got food poisoning, you're gonna have to do it today, are you okay with that? And I'd only been doing the reporting bits for, you know, a year, and the nerves that day were horrendous. And I watch it back now and I can hear my voice shaking, and like Simon says, like I get more nervous like even today doing something like this than I will do when the Superbike season starts. And I think it's partly because you feel accepted, and you know that you've got a kind of a willing audience at home as well. So with the Superbikes now, I feel like I've been doing that for such a long time. I'm kind of accepted. And, you know, to your point, Vernon, when I did the NFL for a couple of years, I did the highlight shows for the BBC for a couple of years, and nobody knew not that anybody knows who I am anyway, but certainly that audience had no idea. So they were going on, you know, Twitter and things, and who's this guy? And you feel that extra pressure. And I was reminded of something when you were talking about best and worst moments earlier as well. I actually did the Super Bowl live in 2009 with Jake Humphrey, and Jake was back in the studio in London, and I was out in Miami, sat next to this Hall of Famer cornerback, Rod Woodson, who was like twice the size of me. I had my wedding suit on because it was the only suit I had. Right? And I'd gone out there, and as Stint said earlier on, you're in one of these kind of situations where you know that that's your only chance. It's your first chance. And in a lot of ways, you're probably not prepared for it. I definitely wasn't prepared for that. And I knew that if I got it badly wrong, you know, that would probably be the last time I did it, which turned out to be the case. But I remember they would come to me, and because obviously there's no ad breaks on the BBC, so during the Super Bowl, you never quite know when the breaks in play are. And you know, you've done it then, you know, like they come to you and you're like, oh. And they threw it out to me, and I was sat in this little gantry with Rod Woodson next to me, and I think we just had 2 APs and a cameraman. They're like, Matt, they're coming to you, talk about what's going on. And I looked over my shoulder, and they were assembling the stage for the halftime show. And Jake said to me, what's going on out there, Matt? And I looked over my shoulder, and I said, oh, it looks like a load of ants eating a biscuit, only in reverse. That's what I think. And I don't even now to say it, but I think I was trying to be funny. And they just cut back to the studio, and there was Jake, there was Mike Carlson, and there was Alex Smith, the quarterback for the 49ers, all sat there in silence, and they all looked at each other. And Mike, and you'll know Mike Vernon, is actually really, really funny. And he said, does that mean the biscuit's eating the ant? I was sat there in Miami just going, I'm never going to do this ever again. So, as for nerves, you know, they got the best of me in those situations. But generally now with the bikes, it's quite nice because it feels familiar. You feel like the people who are watching it are on your side, and I suppose that only really comes with experience. So yeah, something.
Simon touched on something earlier on how important those relationships are that you build. You know, when you travel with the teams in motorsport, when you get to know the drivers on a social level in particular, that, you know, that's where you can really get to the person under the helmet. And I think that's pivotal to being able to ask for an extra interview or a quick chat, so should a story develop. But also it gives you not ammunition, but it gives you the ability, you arm yourself with the ability to have a real open and honest conversation instead of a PR-driven conversation. You know, there's several guys on the grid in Formula E who I've got to know really well. You know, play golf with a few of them, and those interviews are more personal interviews than they are sports broadcast interviews, if that makes any sense. You know, because that's your mate, and you know that, you know, he's about to race and hope that your friends get a good result. So Simon hit the nail on the head by, once you get in there, once you get through the door, try and build as many good relationships with people as possible. I mean, Steve, sorry to go back. Steve, with the golf, can you get on Augusta? Because you've been doing it.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question, Steve. Can we? Yeah,
I'll get you on. I'll get you on. But, no, I played twice. I was lucky enough to play there twice, and actually, it's a bit of a story, but it's they used to have a ballot to get you on an Augusta, and if you were like had a press pass or you were trade, you put that into the ballot, and they draw out 40 names for the next day, and there's like 2,500 people do this, so I never came out in the ballot. And we had a production company that would do all our facilities. They came in from St. Louis, and we had a guy in the sound truck who was about 22 stone. He had a ZZ top beard and a pair of cut down jeans and everything. And he came out in the ballot. And we all assumed that he would pass his ballot ticket on to someone who, he said, no, he said, I've been coming here for 5 years. It looks a really neat place. He said, I've never played golf. He said, and he went down Washington Road to Kmart, bought himself a $65 half set of golf clubs and walked down Magnolia Lane with a ticket. And his first ever golf shot was off the first tee at Augusta.
That's unfair. That's unfair.
I'm going to mute myself for a moment.
The great thing was, as a result of that experience, they made the whole thing the next year invitation only. So we managed to get on a couple. So I'm eternally in his debt.
Oh dear, that's very funny. Right, I'm going to crack through some of these questions. We've got so many. Right. Abigail says, I'm studying factual TV production at college. Is that a good way to start motorsport presenting? It's good if you can actually speak, that helps. What do you reckon, Steve?
I would say it is a step in the right direction, but the final step towards motorsport presenting is a long way off. And you've got to go through a number of layers of making contacts with the kind of area of motorsport that you want to get involved in. Just parachuting yourself into Formula One isn't going to happen. You would need to build relationships, and I can recommend the British Touring Car Championship and the attached championships there as a good way of establishing relationships and getting that all-important experience. But also simply get yourself in front of a camera as much as you can. Social media is a wonderful vehicle that we didn't have when I was forging a career, and get as much experience under your belt as you possibly can. And park the idea of being a high-profile motorsport presenter just for a while, and just try to take the incremental steps along the way that you need to do.
Will Pierce has been in touch with a similar question saying, how would you suggest someone gets into motorsport presenting as a recent school leaver, so age 19? And this is the exact demographic of people I wanted to try and help out, because at the moment with COVID and everything, it's difficult to get work experience. It's difficult to do a traditional routine. Matt, let's come to you first.
Well, I think, yeah, there is obviously a lot of challenges at the moment, but there's also a lot of opportunities to do things yourself now. You can, you know, I suppose back in the day for us, using your initiative meant going and running or doing jobs for production companies. Now, I mean, I know a couple of guys who are motorsport commentators and presenters already, doing esports and things like that, who have set up their own podcast, for example, or a website or things like that, and they're able to gather experience and get accreditation for events that, frankly, sometimes I'm quite surprised, where you'll see a guy in the media center and he's got his lanyard around his neck for his radio station that he set up, which is an online radio station with 10 listeners, but it kind of doesn't matter because he's in the door now. And that's, I'm not saying that disrespectfully to those people at all, quite the opposite. You know, I think if you use your initiative in whatever way that is, that goes a long way, and people recognize that. So I would say that I think there are some quite good opportunities nowadays to reach out to people. I know I did an interview with a girl in Ireland the other day who's running an Instagram session, you know, these live Q&As on Instagram, and I think most people that she reaches out to, you know, you can get in touch with people via these social media formats, and do something and just get out there.
Yeah, make contact with the teams. I would say that is a priority. Just try to pinpoint the teams that look as if they might not have a great deal of money and might need a little bit of help in the sort of social media communications kind of area. A lot of them are around the British Touring Car Championship and around the TOCA support program. Get in contact, say you'll work for nothing. You're just looking for the experience, and see how much progress you can make that way. I think is another avenue, but podcasts and everything else are a wonderful vehicle for getting your experience and your face out there as well.
Yeah,
funnily enough, Luke, oh, sorry, you go, Matt.
Yeah, sorry, Jenny. I was just going to add to Steve there and say British Superbikes, particularly the paddock there, is very welcoming to people, and to do team press releases and
Yeah, I was just saying, Luke Wallace just got in touch saying, Steve, how would you suggest getting involved with the TOCA support package? So you kind of answered the question already. You've got to reach out to people, haven't you? And I think a lot of people are a bit nervous, but you just got to bang on doors, haven't you?
Well, you have, and you know, a lot of those teams are sort of living hand to mouth, and communications and you know, public profile becomes a lower priority. So if you go in there and say, look, you know, I'll write all your race reports, I'll do your driver profiles, I'll do your basic communications and social media requirements. Just give me a press pass and I'll stand at the back of the garage, and by the end of the season, I'll be indispensable and you'll be up and running and you'll have some kind of a career and some kind of a foothold. It is not just the support programs. I tell you, the back half of the touring car grid would welcome volunteers like that with open arms as well.
Okay, so we're going to wrap things up in a minute because I'm aware that we've all got plenty to do. And Vernon's just been, what was it, tea or coffee or gin, Vernon, that you've got?
It's coffee. Tess was very kind to bring me a cup of coffee.
Bless, that's a large mug as well.
In a Super Bowl mug, yeah.
Ah.
No lunchtime gin yet. It's a bit
Not yet.
early,
Not yet.
And
The
slightly
kids are still
off
homeschooling.
Although, yeah, you're right. Homeschooling, it pushes it back every day.
Yeah.
Give it another week, we'll be fine.
Yeah. Can I just add one more, Jenny, on that, with going in the TV route? If you want to, you know, if you're trying to get into motorsport, there is also the TV company lines. So whether it's BBC, ITV, Eurosport, Sky, BT, whatever, if you can manage to secure yourself some work experience there, a lot of people do come through that and the production route. And then once you're established in a team and you're into these TV companies, then you can almost try and navigate where you want to get to if you establish your relationships within there and build a bit of a reputation. Certainly that's how it works in Sky. A lot of people are coming through. Look at Laura Woods on the football, for example. She spent a lot of time behind the scenes and now she's absolutely flying, doing really well.
Yeah, Dermot O'Leary was a runner beforehand, before he got into with the microphone in his hand. So he went through that route as well. That's a really good way because, like Steve said earlier on, learning the mechanic of television and how it works is really important, because no one's going to give you a microphone on your first day and say, right, go and ask these questions in the paddock and on the grid, please. So to learn that mechanic and how the system works is really important.
Will has been in touch, Will Pierce, to say about diversity. And I did say I'd probably end up asking this question because the community is changing and it's changing quite quickly. And it needed to change as well, I believe. So the inclusion, diversity, LGBTQ+ community, all of that side of things needs to shift. And Simon, I mean, there are great steps now being made, aren't they, to mix things up a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I was reasonably outspoken this year about it with regards to what was going on with Formula One. You could look at it, taking a knee, not taking a knee. You know, there was a lot of divisiveness there, I think, to start with. But I think with the Hamilton Commission, the work that Lewis is doing, for example, to get more diverse backgrounds coming into motorsport, I think that's a step in the right direction. I think all the teams, all the TV companies, absolutely, it's right at the top of the agenda. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity going forward than there has been. I think it's just kind of life and TV and sport catching up with itself. It needed to get there, but so did the world, didn't it, really? But I'm pretty positive for the future.
But I'm just going to, sorry, Jenny, to interrupt, but I think it's really important personally that TV companies and broadcasters have the responsibility to train young people and to get them into the system. That's for my opinion. In my opinion, that's where the problem lies, is that there aren't enough roads and alleyways for young people, no matter where they're from, to get into television. It's a really, really difficult industry to break through. And I think, you know, all the big broadcasters, all the big production houses have to have a route of entry for young people to get in and do work experience and experience what it's like behind the scenes, and try directing, try producing, try writing a couple of pages of the next script, you know, and really, really submerge young people into this amazing medium that we're so fortunate to enjoy. I'll step off my soapbox now, but I think it's really important that we get a real consistent flow of fresh, new, vibrant talent into every form of broadcast media. You know, entertainment, sport, news, current affairs, dramas, all aspects of broadcast media.
And also on the subject of diversity, that there is a responsibility on the side of the applicants as well, and those with ambition. And if you start getting in your mind that motorsport is a closed shop, it's not for me because I don't see anyone else like me operating in motorsport, therefore all you are doing is prolonging and promoting the lack of diversity, if indeed the lack of diversity does exist. Get in there. Don't make diversity a part of your agenda. Just say, right, this job is for me. I've got the right qualifications. I'm going to bust the door down. And there is a responsibility on both sides of the equation, I think, and especially from those trying to break into a sport and further their career and further their ambition.
Yeah, there's one thing I would say about motorsport, guys, and that is, I think that esports is hopefully going to really help the wheels of change in that respect, as regards diversity, because I think there's huge social and cultural structures in place that means that we don't get diverse representation within car racing and also motorcycles. But I was part of some of the first broadcasts of the World Finals that Gran Turismo did, PlayStation game, a couple of years ago. And the FIA had taken a huge interest in that, because I'm not saying anybody can have a PlayStation, because not everybody can, but it's certainly a lot cheaper to buy a PlayStation than it is to buy a go-kart and do a full season of racing. And I think one of the reasons the FIA is so interested in it is because it allows for that diversity, and that goes for every kind of diversity as well, whether it's sexual or racial or whatever. So hopefully, I think, you know, the closer these games and esports gets to the reality as well. We're already seeing platforms like Gran Turismo. They're taking drivers who are really, really good on the game, which is virtually a simulator now anyway, and they can stick them in a race car and see how they do. And I think hopefully over the coming years we're going to see some drivers emerge from those scenes, and that will give the FIA the opportunity to embrace the diversity that I'm sure they're desperate to do, but because of social structures that are out of their hands, you know, they don't probably have the possibility to address it immediately.
Yeah, most of the drivers in the touring car championship learned on PlayStations, and it showed.
There you go.
We love a good crash.
I just got the back end of that, Steve. Oh.
That's what they did. Right, two more questions for you. LA Wilshaw, and this one is, well, I'll let you judge who it's for. It's directed at Vernon, but maybe Matt wants to answer as well. It says, Vernon, I'm only down the road from you. Do you think having a regional accent matters as a presenter? Should I be working on poshing it up a bit?
Not anymore. Not anymore. I was quite surprised. Tess showed me an article, I think it was in the Times, the Sunday Times, and it was about the BBC opening up its doors even more to regional and in particular northern accents. And, you know, I'm waving in the background like, hello. But, you know, I think having a regional accent and not, you know, the beautiful Queen's accent, English accent, I think me personally, because I've experienced it and I'm living it, I think it I have to be careful what I say so that I don't trip myself up. But I just think it makes it warmer, you know, because you're like, yeah, northern lad or lady on this glamorous grid in Monaco. You all right, mate? How you doing? you know, there's something quite homely about it, and it doesn't make a difference, in my opinion, and it shouldn't, where you're from or what your accent is, because your passion for your job is what's key. And I saw a great question earlier on, and I'm just going to, please excuse me, gang, I'm just going to try and scroll through, and it was about adding personality into your broadcast. And I pretty much have taken the American way of sports broadcasting, that they treat sport as entertainment. And because I'm from an entertainment background, I can't step away from that. So I always try and leave my driver laughing. That's the one thing I always want to do, no matter how into the racing you get, no matter how into his strategy and the race ahead you get, I always want to leave him laughing, because it's just a joyous moment that we're both celebrating at the start of, excuse me, this awesome race. Gladiators, as Matt, I think it was, described it, are about to take part in. But I always just want to say, you know, good luck, your less is undone, you know, that kind of thing. And because I just think it brings it alive. It makes it real. That's what it makes it real.
Yeah, and I think, Vernon, part of that is you're being yourself as well, and you're feeling that you can be yourself. And I have to say, mate, you know, for me, when I first started doing the TV stuff on the BBC, and whenever that was 2006, I definitely changed my accent 100%, because I felt that was what was required at the time. And I used to have this TV voice that I'd come home and get absolutely hammered for. But I was living in Spain at the time, so I speak, you know. But as soon as I came back to Huddersfield, my friends and family would be like, "Why do you talk like that when you're on the TV?" And over the years,
your telephone voice, Matt.
Yeah. Honestly, I definitely, and I look back, you know, not that you often look back on things, but if I ever look back on it now, I can hear it and I'm like, oh, and I wasn't being myself, you know, that's the bottom line. And actually, whether it's partly to do with experience, you get more comfortable, you feel that you can be yourself. But also, I have to say, Vernon, I think guys like yourself doing mainstream entertainment with a regional accent, and doing it so well, like you have done over the years, and also guys like obviously Anton Deck and other people, I think it's changed perceptions of you know, in producers' minds, maybe in the offices at places like the BBC, that okay, you know, there is another way to do this, and regional accents are acceptable and even desirable, like you said. So yeah, I you know, I feel like that's been a real help for me over the years, and now I go the other way. I'm like, hey up. All right.
Yeah. I think it's nice to get like equal representation, isn't it? You know, if you look at sports in general, everyone takes part in sports. You know, you look at our athletes in Team GB. There's huge diversity, but when it comes to broadcast, maybe it isn't reflected as well as it should be. But I think, you know, an accent is a starting place. It's a foundation, I guess. And then we'll move on from there. But I mean, the thing that blows me away is it's 2021. Do you know what I mean? We're not entrenched in the 40s or the 60s anymore. It's 2021. It's like, come on. It should be equal. It should be equal across the board, so to speak. You know, but you know, I think we're getting there. We're getting there, surely. But
Steve, do you think? Would you say in your experience when you first went to the BBC, when you know working on grandstand and things, is it fair, or is it just our kind of perception from the outside that the regional accents weren't welcome?
I'm now starting to think, how can I get one of these northern accents?
Are they for sale somewhere?
I'm trying to revive my career here. I think that's the way.
Steve, Gladys and Norman have got a spare bedroom. They'd love to put you up and teach you a northern accent.
No, I mean, nobody at the. I mean, it was a sort of preconception that the BBC English and all that sort of thing. Certainly within sport, there was never any kind of coaching within the BBC. I think I spent 20 odd years at the BBC. On no occasion did any producer come to me and say, have you tried doing it this way? Have you tried doing it that way? Any kind of reaction to the way that you were performing on screen. And I'm one of these people who never watches myself back anyway. So I probably,
really, you never watch yourself back, Steve?
No, not if I can avoid it. So probably I was doing something gross, which you know, was never pointed out to me. But it's one of these things that you have to sort of guide yourself towards, because it is a misunderstanding that the BBC sort of mold you. That never happened, and I don't think it happened with any other presenter I was working with.
Felt that was what was expected. You know, nobody ever kind of made me do it.
Yeah, that's the right way, because if they encourage you to become something that you're not, then the whole thing, then you're acting, and it's a whole different profession.
I hosted 3 network shows in America, and prior to each one, they insisted that I took elocution lessons, and it was god awful. I just ended up, Steve, you're right. I just ended up doing an impression of Roger Moore.
Yeah.
and it took my attention away from actual gameplay of the quizzes that I was hosting. It was such a distraction where, you know, because when you talk and when you're hosting a game or when you're doing a live broadcast, you're in beats and rhythms, and you're trying to get to a certain point or a cutoff point. But when you're thinking about, goodness gracious me, can people understand me? It gets really, it just distracts you, and it's just god awful. So I wouldn't encourage anyone to watch it on YouTube.
I was going to say, I actually got my first job because of my very dull, non-accented voice. So I worked as a continuity announcer for ITV. And that was kind of quite a big break for me. And it taught me a huge amount. So don't think that a job could lead you to a dead end, because actually you can just learn loads of experience and go off and use that experience for something else. But they, at the time, they very much wanted a very kind of spoken, what they seemed as a southern accent. They didn't want regional accents. They'd done the regional bit for a couple of years, so they wanted to bring it back to what they seemed as a more traditional voice. And then 2 years later, or even if you listen now to ITV and the little bits before and after each program, it's full of very diverse, different accents, which I think is possibly a good thing. We're massively out of time. We've overrun hugely. I'm sorry to all you guys, because I said I promised I wouldn't keep you for over an hour. I've gone over an hour. So what I want to do is just whip round all of you to give some guidance, your sort of key piece, your key message to people at home watching, if they really want to get into motorsport broadcasting and be a presenter. Matt, let's start with you, please.
I would say the key thing is to use your initiative. I think it gets you a long way, but also people like to see it. So, you know, be proactive. As Steve mentioned, think about opportunities with teams within various different paddocks, and also within television as well. You know, everybody starts somewhere, and it kind of doesn't matter where, but get your foot in somewhere and use your initiative and grasp every opportunity that comes your way.
Simon.
Yeah, what Matt said, really, just never give up. I think as we've discussed on this, and it's been, you know, a real pleasure. Thanks, Jenny, for putting it all together. But it's just that, just never give up spirit. You know, it doesn't matter where you come from, what you've done before in the past. If you keep on knocking on the doors, eventually one will open. And once you've got your foot through that door, that's your opportunity, and try and take it with both hands and be professional and build those relationships. Because I think it was Steve-O from the Rugby League once said to me at Sky, you know, it's about taking care of the people when you're on your way up and moving towards, through any industry really, because that bolster of support underneath you and guiding you through will be invaluable. Because you don't want to be a right diva when you get on screen. That's none of us aspire to be that kind of person. And I think that can get levelled at TV presenters sometimes. But having chatted to everyone on this call, I don't get the impression there's too many divas on this.
Vernon?
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Exactly what Simon and Matt said. That is, you know, don't give up. That's the main key. But once you get there, energy, loads of enthusiasm, loads of character, bring something to the table, you know, offer something new or different, but yet do a cracking job and know your stuff. You know, there's not one person here who hasn't sat down for days or maybe even weeks on end, learning about everything that there is that could possibly be covered in a live sports broadcast, because trust me, it will pop up.
And Steve.
Yeah, just endorsing what everyone else has said. I mean, you've got to be patient and don't get resentful. And when the opportunities don't come, we take your enthusiasm and your knowledge of motorsport for granted. So work on your understanding of how broadcasting works. And if you get any opportunities to develop a portfolio of material there and understand how television and broadcasting works, that goes alongside your motorsport ambitions and your motorsport experience. But don't get impatient, because there are only 4 key jobs in motorsport broadcasting, and we've got them.
Yes, Steve.
What a wonderful way to end the guidance.
I love it.
Yeah, we've got to keep the central heating on. Let's not forget that.
Exactly.
On that note, gentlemen, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure there'll be a whole load of people chomping at our ankles to try and get those best jobs in sport broadcasting. As you said, Steve, they're not for sale.
Not yet. Give us a few more years to pay the mortgage off. Yeah.
Mine's coming up quite soon, I tell you.
To everybody at home, thank you so much for joining us for the webinar. If you've been watching on replay, thank you for watching it back on YouTube. And all that's left for us to say is hopefully you've enjoyed it. And from all of us, goodbye.
Cheers all. Vernon, Simon, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, gang. Enjoyed
Well
that.
done. Well done to you, Jenny, as well.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.